Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the third of our BGANZ Botanic Gardens month webinars, our Thursday night chats. We've got a fantastic conversation ready to go for you this evening with Emma Simpkins from the Botanical Records and Conservation Officer. Well, she's a Botanical Records and Conservation Officer at Auckland Botanic Gardens, and Andre Messina, who's a botanist at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Victoria. It's going to be a wonderful chat about plant hunting, and yeah, wait till you see some of the stories that they prepare to share with us. Big thanks to our sponsor at BGANZ, CSOL, who have been backing this webinar series across the last 3 Thursdays, and we've got one more next week, which I'll tell you about. But before we get into it, we've got a nice video that we're going to share. Some of you may have seen it last week, and I'm just going to pop this one up now for you to enjoy just while we let the audience in. So here we go. Enjoy this for about 3 minutes, and then we'll be back. So I'll see you soon.
Today, we are visiting botanic gardens across Victoria to, among other things, understand a little bit more about education, horticulture, conservation and community engagement. I hope this is an opportunity for people to learn a little bit more about botanic gardens that they didn't already know, and encourage them to go out into botanic gardens and appreciate all the value that they can provide.
Botanic garden for me is obviously beyond the individual plants and their scientific value is the notion of botanic gardens as very special social places as well. We have a number of groups who come to our gardens, or are very welcomed to our gardens, from high school students. We've got a beautiful local high school who come to our gardens to they study photography, so they're using our garden as a venue to come and find beautiful things to photograph. Basically, we're really trying to encourage children to look and be in a garden in a particular way. And what we try to do is role model the way we'd like people to be in the garden in terms of interacting gently with the space. But really we're trying to foster a love of plants and a connection to the garden.
The best thing about a botanic garden is that it holds all those collections of plants, that you can come here and visit the world without having to travel anywhere else. That you can come here and visit plants that you wouldn't see in your backyard, you wouldn't see in your local area. So we're in a process of expansion and building. So we've just created our Garden for the Future, which is under 12 months old. We've also got the oldest public garden in Bendigo as well. So our heritage garden is over 160 years old. So hopefully we'll be replacing some of the older trees in the gardens in the heritage section. We'll also be joining the new garden with the old, so there'll be a new transition zone between the two gardens.
I think the really great botanic gardens are botanic gardens that are hubs. They're social hubs, they're environmental hubs, they're conservation hubs, they're horticultural hubs. The role of botanic gardens in conservation, what we're doing with BGANZ Victoria is looking at establishing conservation collections in a number of regional botanic gardens across the state of Victoria. But for that project to be sort of driven and supported by the Royal Botanic Gardens Victoria. Essentially what we're doing is we're going out to regional botanic gardens, we're working with the gardens curators and gardens managers on an approach to establishing collections of rare and threatened plants that are significant to that particular area. And then the RBGV will actually collect, source and propagate all that material and then distribute that material back out into regional gardens.
So a botanic garden, for me, means that it's a place for people to firstly enjoy, but then it has all those other benefits of labelled plants, documented collections of plants. The importance of botanic gardens to communities, I believe, is that it gives them a sense of pride, it gives them a sense of place, and we've had people come on guided tours here, and one particular comment said the Melton Botanic Garden has put Melton on the map. To a large extent, this garden is the community, because the people have been the ones pushing it, backing it. The feedback we get from people who are visiting, walking through, doing recreational activities here is just fantastic.
A community space.
It's a garden to display a collection or a variety of plants.
What is a botanical garden? The most beautiful place to come to.
It's a wonderful refuge for the community and for visitors.
I think the free access is the best thing.
For me personally, it's the joy that it brings to people.
Everything. I guess, we need plants for everything to live, really.
Education, conservation ideals, and public enjoyment.
Knowledge and inspiration and understanding.
Well, I'd be biased and say the Eramophilas.
Banksia.
Oh, in Australia, red gum trees.
A plant with gum nuts in it.
It's the eucalyptus.
Eucalyptus.
Eucalyptus gum tree.
Botanic Gardens Day is the last Sunday in May, so put it in your diary. Oh, who was that bloke on there at the end? I think I was in the same shirt. I haven't changed. Now, there's a little bit of a clue if you just have a look at this shirt, and there is a question. What do you know about this T-shirt that may be incorrect? I'll leave that with you, and there will be a question, and we'll see who's the winner of that a little later. But look, a big welcome to everyone to this, our third webinar. I'm very excited to be here, and I'd like to start by acknowledging that I'm over here in Perth, in Kalamunda, and I'm on Noongar Budja country. And I spoke with one of my good friends, elder here in Perth, John McBain, and he mentioned to me that I should begin by saying Kaya Wanju Wanju, which means hello and welcome together. So I'd like to acknowledge, given that we're all coming from different parts of our country here in Australia and New Zealand, I'd like to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging, any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and anywhere around the country. Welcome to this webinar. As you know, everything we do about plants is about caring for country. And the three webinars have been fantastic. There's been a lot of information shared in ways that our botanists, our gardeners, our horts are working with plants and working with horticulture. And there's no shortage of that tonight. Of course, this is all about the beginning, the month of May, and heading into Botanic Gardens Day on the final Sunday in May. So look out for events that are going on at your Botanic Gardens. You might have noticed down on the stream there, I asked if you could mention to us whereabouts you're joining us from, what country you are on. And I'm looking at some of the comments here, and we've got Rebecca. I'm on Wanaganini country in Copacabana on the Central Coast. Welcome, Rebecca. Darug country for SAR. Who else have we got? There's lots of people. So feel free to let us know exactly where you're joining us from, and I'll flick those comments up as we go. Ngunnawal country. We've got Ngunnawal country down in Canberra. Wurundjeri. I'm on Bunurong lands. Wow, there's people joining us from everywhere. Thank you for sharing. Kelly's down in Shepparton, Sunbury in Melbourne. Wow, there's people coming, Gubby country. Thanks, Robin. Welcome to you. So I'd like to start by welcoming Kia ora from New Zealand. Thanks, Marcella Munoz Moreno. Welcome to you to our broadcast. So I'd like to start by introducing our two guest speakers. First up, we have Emma Simpkins. Now, Emma is based, I'm just getting her banner here. Emma is based at the Auckland Botanic Gardens, and she's the Botanical Records and Conservation Officer. Emma, great to welcome you to our third BGANZ webinar. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Costa. I'm really excited to be here and chat to you all and see what amazing questions you've got for us tonight.
Exactly. That's a good point for everyone listening. Load up your questions, and Rebecca will be noting down the questions and putting them in the chat for me, so I'll be able to find them very quickly and be able to put them up there at the end of Rebecca's chat, and then of course at the end of Rebecca and Andre's contribution. So Rebecca, I think probably the best way to start is give us a little bit of a background into how you came into your love of plants. That's what the Plant Lovers Challenge hashtag is all about this month. So kind of give us a little bit of an idea of what and who it was that got you into plants, and how your journey took you to this current position at the Auckland Gardens.
Yeah, so my first ever trip to a botanic garden, I was 2 years old, and my mum has a great photo of me standing outside my now office. And all through school, I loved nature. We always went on trips that kind of were always outdoors. And at university, I went on to study ecology and conservation, and I studied New Zealand orchids. So in Australia, you've got Pterostylis. We also share them in New Zealand, so I studied those. And when I finished my research, I landed my dream job, which is what I'm doing now, working at the Auckland Botanic Gardens. So it's been a full circle of starting my love of plants quite early on in my life.
Wow! And how did the transformation, like how did the opportunity come up for this current job, and what was it that you sought?
So this job was initially just covering maternity leave, and I was just fresh out of university. But I just saw this title on a page and thought, that's a bit of me. It kind of tinkered that love of like records and keeping clear and concise data, as well as working with the community on conservation and research projects.
Wow, yeah, data. Like data it's so critical, in not just in the keeping of it, but how we get it out there. Science communication today is a real political thing, because we have to inform people, and where people get their information and how that information is packaged into these little windows that we can get it is critical. And that's what's great about this webinar series, that we can make these exchanges online. People are at home and suddenly they're in front of you. So take it away, Emma, and tell us all about your plant hunting.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of years ago, I was involved in doing some field work on an offshore island, which is just off the coast of Auckland. It's an island called Aotea Great Barrier. So it's an island that has some really unique plants on it. And one thing to note about New Zealand is a lot of our threatened plants are on offshore islands. They're not really on the mainland. So a number of these plants are in the Myrtaceae family. And so that's in the myrtle family, things like eucalypts and feed joas and leptospermums. And we decided we needed to collect some seed of those Myrtaceae, because myrtle rust hadn't arrived in New Zealand. And myrtle rust, as many of you might know, affects only plants in the Myrtaceae family. And we weren't really sure how New Zealand plants would respond to this fungus arriving. So we headed over to the island, and one thing to really know about doing field work is there's lots and lots of planning that goes into it. It's not just simply turning up and doing some collections. You've got to do quite a few weeks of planning, look at old historical records, look at where plants were most recently found, and kind of plot out where you're planning to go. So we did lots of preparation. And then we headed over to Aotea, which this is it here. We were kind of working in these areas that are on top of mountains, these kind of rocky outcrops where an endemic plant to Aotea called Kunzia sinclairi, or we call it a kānuka, grows in this area. And so we were working with the local community there, and also with our local government agency, the Department of Conservation, to seed collect a number of target species. And one of the things that is really important about doing collections for restoration or conservation is that you've got to collect a lot of seed. You've got to collect 10,000 seeds for a good collection. And so that is, to get 10,000 seeds, you've got to collect about 30 to 50 individuals. So we do a bit of maths and we go, how many seeds are in a capsule? How many capsules would you need off each individual to hit that 10,000 mark? And then away we go. So I did that with my colleagues. So as you see through the photos, you'll see us out there collecting seeds. And one of the things that you might not know is you can't usually collect all the seed you need in one trip. So you might have to do a few trips. And in the end, I did 3 trips out there and collected 10,000 seed of 3 species, which was great. So we had those, they're stored in a freezer. But we also managed to do some scoping work on a few other species out on the island that at the time of those visits, we couldn't actually find any flowers or any fruits. And so that's kind of the challenge of doing field work sometimes, is the plants aren't always ready for you. But now we've collected lots of information about where they are. We've GPSed every individual on the island. And so in future years, we can go back and find those plants and track their phenology, their flowering, and hopefully get some fruit in the coming years. So it's a really exciting project to be a part of. It was funded through the Millennium Seed Bank in England, but it was a bit of a collaboration between us and Millennium Seed Bank. So as you can see, it's a really stunning place. Sometimes fieldwork is with amazing weather, like this particular day, out looking the Gulf. So yeah, that's my story.
Straight up off the top there, Rebecca's asked, how do you count 10,000 seed? Like, if someone rings or texts and you're 5,721 and
oh my goodness,
well, the wind comes up.
Thankfully, I don't have to count them. We often count a subset, so we might count 100 and weigh them, and then do a bit of maths to calculate how many 10,000, how much 10,000 would be. So we use other little bits of technology to figure that out, because the seed that we were counting is honestly smaller than, you know, the top of a needle. So it's very, very fine seed, and we'd never count that.
Wow, that we had Karen Sanchez said multiple trips to paradise.
Absolutely, Karen, absolutely.
We've got one here. Tessa asked, is it mostly heath and scrub?
Yes, on this particular area is that kind of open scrubland type area, and that's really common in New Zealand. A lot of our threatened plants like that open, frequent disturbance. Not a lot of our threatened plants are found in forest. So these are the types of areas a lot of the field work that I do is in, which is not a bad place to be.
How long can you store the seeds in the freezer for?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So these seed are really fine, and unfortunately they don't store for very long. So probably about 5 to 10 years. So you've got to do these collections quite frequently. So the seed bank will be testing their viability, and when it starts to get really low, they'll let us know and we'll make another collection.
Yeah, wow. Rebecca asked, is it as romantic as it looks out collecting on an island? Like, what's the backstory? Like, how difficult to get conditions-wise?
Yeah, actually, it's not terrible, but you might be doing 6 to 8 hours of walking in a day, and you're carrying all your equipment. And this one was kind of quite a steep hike up. So you did the hard work in the morning and then a really nice, gentle walk home, but it did take about 4 hours.
Tex has asked, do you grow some on as a living collection?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So yes, we do. The endemic Kunzea species to Aotea, we grow at the Auckland Botanic Gardens as kind of the ex situ collection. And we hope to have some of those species in other gardens around New Zealand as well as kind of
Hi, Emma. Great project been involved with. Do you mind sharing the backstory of how you got involved with the Millennium Seed Bank?
Yeah, awesome question. I think being a part of a botanic garden allows you to kind of connect internationally. And the Millennium Seed Bank were working on a project where they wanted to seed bank all tree species around the world, which is a really ambitious goal and what's something we wanted to be a part of. So we applied to them to have a bit of funding to help contribute, and we did by collecting 3 species.
Wow, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you're talking just 3 species. Like, it's just 3.
Just 3, yeah. And so that was 3 field trips, and each field trip was about 4 days. And then you think about probably spending about 2 to 3 weeks of doing some planning and research and making sure your identification skills are up to scratch. So it's a lot of work just for a few species, really.
Yeah, wow. I just flicked over onto a couple of the other slides which we saw earlier that I didn't hold up. What were you actually doing in this slide?
We're not posing for a photo at all, no. One of the things I was doing was helping mentor my colleagues in other organisations with identification skills. So here we were kind of working on figuring out the differences between different Metrosideros species up on the mountain, which was great.
Wow. Vicky asked, do you share the seeds to native nurseries to propagate to share more widely in areas they may grow?
That's a really good question. For this particular project, we didn't. One of the things we do is we work with the local Indigenous people of that area, and often they have conditions and reasons why they'd like to use the seeds. So in this particular case, they just wanted the seed to be stored for conservation and future restoration back to the island. So that's what that seed's earmarked for.
It sort of ties in a bit with Janelle's question, which was, how well do these species grow in a home garden, and is this being encouraged? I suppose you've kind of answered that in a sense.
Yeah. Do you know what? All 3 of the ones that we collected do great in a home garden. And that's one of the unique things that we do at Auckland Botanic Gardens is we only grow plants that do well in Auckland conditions. So when our visitors come to see us and they see plants in our garden, they can go home and confidently grow them in their home garden.
Wow. Tim just asked, are there more trips planned for other species?
Not at this stage, but I absolutely put my hand up to go again.
You're standing in a queue that doesn't exist. But,
yeah.
It's kind of like, I'm ready. As soon as they announce a queue, you are there.
Yeah, I'm off. Yeah.
John's asked a good question, and it ties back to what you said early on. Has myrtle rust become a problem in NZ? Oh, no, actually, I'll go back to John's one and then I'll get to yours, Tex. Is this Kunzia threatened by myrtle rust?
Great question. It will be, but we have no records so far to show that this particular species has been infected. So nor is it being kind of tested in any of the research. A lot of research in New Zealand is just on our very, very common myrtles. So this one hasn't been tested yet, but hopefully in the next couple of years we'll get a better understanding of that. So hopefully this fieldwork has safeguarded this species if it does become infected.
Callum's question sort of flows into that regarding how much of a problem is myrtle rust over there at the moment. Is it threatening? Is it out of control? Is it sort of in specific areas? What's the status quo?
Yeah, I think it's definitely widespread in New Zealand, and it's gradually building up more and more spore load in the environment. So we're seeing a lot more infections. However, we see them more in home gardens and we see them more in nurseries, which nurseries tend to have the better environmental conditions to promote infections like that. And also we're not out in the field enough to be seeing it in those really isolated areas. So we're still working on having a bit more of a surveillance around our natural areas to get a better idea of what species are being affected in the wild. Now,
Callum has made a couple of comments. I like this one. He said, he said, thanks for the amazing work that you're doing. Keep it up. I'm currently learning about revegetation at TAFE and I'm loving it. Thanks for the inspiration. I mean, Callum, that's exactly why we want to do this series, to put people like yourself who are at the beginning of their hort journey in front of people like Emma and Andre and everyone in BGANZ and everyone in this group. You know, look at the people's names, follow them, and you know, share your excitement and inspiration.
Absolutely, yeah. It's fantastic to see young people passionate already this early in their careers.
Callum's follow-up was, what resources can you suggest to find out what plants are endemic to our area? Is there a particular sort of anything specific you can add to that?
In New Zealand, mostly we have through our kind of botanical societies, they tend to have like regional flora lists. But I know in Australia, you've got fantastic online tools that maybe Andre might mention in his talk.
Yeah, and I'll throw that open to, I know John's here and Tim, and if either of you have anything you want to add, and Rebecca, if there's anything you want to add from BGANZ's point of view, just throw it up in the comments. So watch the comments here, Callum, and and Tess has just thrown in there the Atlas of Living Australia. There's lots of great information through them, through the bio blitzes that they do. So yeah, thanks everyone. Feel free. Flora of Victoria, thanks Meg Hurst. Drop all those ideas on there, because it just gives us all oh, there we go. Tess has just put a link for you to follow. So thanks everyone. This is really it's exactly what we want out of this. It's not about Emma and Andre being on the other side of the screen and us just having this close conversation. And it's actually the reason why I love using this platform, because I can pump all your questions up there in front of all of you, so you can just see what's going on and feel a real part of it. Wow, this is fantastic. Are there any final questions? Well, no, I won't say final questions, because we'll go back and bring Emma on again after Andre's chat. But any last questions for Emma in this section? There's the link from Meg for the Flora of Victoria. How supportive is? Oh, this is okay. We'll take this one as the last one at this point. Emma, how supportive is the NZ government for the important research and collection work that you're doing?
Yeah, good question. We work really closely with lots of government agencies, and they understand that research and conservation are core roles for Botanic Gardens. So when we can partner together to make successful collaborations, we do that wherever we can. So.
Oh, fantastic. And John just said, do you have the best hort job in New Zealand?
I might be biased, but I definitely think so.
And a big welcome all the way from Paderborn in Germany, Adam Bell, who's come down, unfortunately with COVID, but he's enjoying this as he whittles the isolation hours away. Well, Adam, that's fantastic that we can share these wonderful images of the amazing work that Emma's been doing. So, Emma, thank you so much for sharing your take on things. It's only a short presentation, but you've given people so much to take away. It's just wonderful. And now we're going to head in and oops, hang on, where are we? We'll head in and have a chat to Andre now. So I'll just take your slides down, Emma, and we'll call in Andre. And Andre, how are you?
G'day. Hey, Costa. Hey, everyone. Yeah, good, thanks.
Lovely to have you here. I suppose I'll start off by just asking you, in a sense, a similar question. If you can give us a bit of background on who and how you got that plant love in your career. I love what you said, Emma, and give us a little bit of insight into that, and then how that's led to your current position at the Botanic Gardens in Victoria, with what you're doing as a botanist down there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm calling in today from the lands of the Wurundjeri people here up in Coburg. I wish to acknowledge them as traditional owners. And this is, I grew up in this sort of general part of Melbourne. But yeah, as a kid, had a lot of time at a house up in Warburton, just running around in mountain ash forest. And yeah, I think as I got older, I realised that I actually really enjoyed just being in the bush, and didn't really know what I wanted to do for a job. And yeah, eventually tried to find a way to get a job that I spent part of my time in the bush, and I somehow managed to do that after quite a bit of study. So I sort of did similar to Emma, I did a conservation biology and ecology degree, and then went and worked for a bit, then came back and did a PhD, and was sort of sniffing around at the National Herbarium of Victoria at Royal Botanic Gardens Victoria for long enough that eventually a job came up, and I was absolutely spot on to get it.
Yeah, but I really love that.
Yeah, so I'm
Oh,
sorry,
just
am I still there?
Yeah, I just lost you a little. How are you there?
Yep.
Okay, we're back. Yeah, that's good. No, I really appreciate what you said there, because for people listening, those steps, the conservation, the conservation course, those stepping stones that both of you explained, it just gives people an idea of the pathways that aren't necessarily written as laneways in horticulture, but they're really just an open road that you need to change lanes and cross the road and take an exit and come up, go over the hill and come down into a new place. It's really nice to hear that, and it sets us up to understand kind of, where you are now and what you're doing with this experience.
Yeah, that's right. It's it's interesting time.
Exactly. So, what do you reckon? Do you want to head in? I'll put your slides up, and
yeah, sure.
And I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah. So today I'm talking about some of the work that I've done in the last couple of summers, following on from the quite big bushfires we've had in Australia. So looking at, well, I guess a bit of background context to that. You might have to change slides, or am I?
Oh, okay. So it's not changing for you?
No, it's not now. Oh, hang on. What if there we go. Whoop.
There we go.
Perfect. Sorry. Worked earlier, I promise. So a bit of the context for that, I guess. So it was quite a big fire. I'm going to talk about the Victorian context because that's where I work. So we had about 1.5 million hectares burn, and that included areas of the Alpine and sort of East Gippsland and sort of the very small rainforest areas we have in Victoria. And following on from this, there was a study that found that there was about 90 species that required immediate action to sort of figure out what was going on with them, because they'd had just a huge range. Their populations burnt, so more than 80% of their known range was lost. So there's a lot of unknown. Most people probably know that plants, particularly in southeastern Australia, are adapted to fire and will respond. So like this top image here, we've got the eucalypts are resprouting and the grasses are regrowing. But I guess we don't know, will everything come back, especially if it's lost, if we've lost all of the populations, are they even there still? Is there any chance for them to come back? And the other thing is, I mean, there's those big red areas on a map and you think, oh, that whole area is gone. But when you go down and ground truth these things, you'll quite often find fires are patchy. So this lower image is of Black Hole Jungle near Malakuta. And you can see that the fire's sort of trickled up to the edge of the rainforest, but it's actually petered out before it's got into the wet bit. So a big part of what I was responsible for doing was getting into these areas, trying to relocate these species. So looking back at records of where they'd been found before the fire and going back and doing a site assessment. Can I find them again? Are they there as seedlings or resprouting? And then things like, is there something potentially threatening its recovery from these fires? So is there feral grazing or really bad weeds or something like that we need to manage? The other thing that we do, so I work for the seed bank here in Victoria, and so I'm involved with a lot of the ex situ conservation. So where appropriate, I was doing seed collection for these species, and for other things. So I was heading up a team of thousands with this. It was, you know, many weeks' work, and so I had horticulturalists out with me as well. So where seed collection wasn't an option, we were getting plant propagation to have a living collection growing here at the gardens in Melbourne and Cranbourne. But one thing I thought I'd touch on really quickly is the Snowy River Gorge. This was one of the really long trips that I went on. It's a really spectacular place. A really big section of it got burnt in the fire. You can see I've crudely drawn a blue line down this map where it's actually burnt.
Yeah.
And so getting into here, we had to, it was a 5-day rafting trip to get in. So it's really remote country.
5 days to get in?
Well, it was 3 days in and then 2 days out.
Wow.
So we had a team of 8 botanists and horticulturalists from the gardens going down. And the sort of the main event on that trip was looking for the Snowy River Westringia cremnifila. It's a really weird plant. It's just known on this one rock face where it, as you can see, it literally grows out of the rock crevices on these sheer cliffs. So on top of the paddling down for a few days, we then had to do quite a bit of climbing to actually get up to them. And on that trip, we managed to get no seed, unfortunately, but collections for living collections back at the gardens. So that was really.
That's
really
amazing.
great. So that was.
You mentioned a word, and I wanted to banner it because it's worthy of a banner. Ground truth, right? You can't let that sort of jargon doesn't just slip past my net. I've been a wicketkeeper, right? And that one stuck straight in the middle of the glove, right? And I need to ask for permission to use it, but I just want to learn a little bit more in terms of just the reality that you're basically saying, you know, if you want to know what the weather is, look out the window. If you want to know what the reality is on the ground, get the truth by being on the ground. Is that effectively what you're saying?
That's it, exactly. Yeah. So it's going and actually seeing, rather than just trying to map it or extrapolate or things like that.
John said, so I mean, that is fascinating. This plant that you're showing us is growing in one rugged rock face.
Yeah.
And you found it there.
So bizarre. So thankfully, you can see in that image there, I've got Neville Walsh with me. Neville's been at the gardens since forever, and he'd been in there, I think, 15 or 20 years previous, and found those plants. So he was with us to make sure we got to the right rock face. Without him, I don't know that we would have found it. but now we have, you know, fully GPS records of where we were exactly, and it'll be a lot easier for someone else to find if they want to do the big trip in. Or hopefully I get to do the big trip in again one day.
Well, that's Rugged Landscape, Karen said. Hope you get paid danger money. And Rebecca said, where are we? How many times have you done the trip to go back and look for it?
So this was the one and only time for me. I know, yeah, it's the sort of spot that you don't get into easily, and we were only able to do that because we secured additional funding to really, yeah, that was a very expensive trip.
Yeah,
much more expensive than just getting in the car.
Yeah, walking 100 meters up the road. Sort of like, oh yeah, let's just go in there for a bit and see what we come across and how bad the fire was, sort of thing.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's what my work's usually much more like that. It's, occasionally you get to go in a boat or a helicopter or something fun, but.
Ali Wynn said extreme plant hunting, and Janelle asked the Westringia cremnophilia that you're talking about. It's a lovely plant. What do you know about it? For example, do you know much about what pollinates it?
No, I don't know very much about it at all, to be honest. Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, how do the seeds land in those in a sheer rock face to germinate? That I've got no idea. Unfortunately, it wasn't flowering when we were there, so we couldn't sort of make any pollinator observations. But the image that's there is from a plant at, I think, Melbourne that we have growing. And I suspect bees would be all over it, but whether that is indicative of all of what's going on in the wild, I've got no idea.
Is there follow-up research required?
I think there definitely is, and it's one that I'd be really keen to get seed off. And whenever there's the slightest hint of a bit of funding, I've been badgering, how about you get us back in the boat? So
yes,
it's work in progress.
Said, Rick threw in there perhaps birds.
Yeah, quite possibly. Although not a very big flower and not particularly showy, so and white rather than a red or a bright yellow or anything like that.
John asked, were these cliff Westringias affected by the fires?
Yeah. So they were, and so we had Neville's population count from before the fire, which I think was about 200 individuals, and I think we found 80 that were resprouting. So they haven't been burnt by the fire, but I think they've been killed by the radiant heat. So you're sitting on this rock face so that the fire doesn't carry up the rock face, but just the sheer heat from the fire as it's gone over the top, it's just sort of superheated those rocks, and the plants have been cooked, but now they're, about 40% of them are resprouting from the base.
Wow. Vicky asked, do you like it to stay rare, or do you hope to bring it to mainstream gardens to save it forever? What's the reality in a question like that?
Yeah, and I mean, for things like that, I mean, it's probably a naturally rare thing. I mean, it would have never, occurred outside of this one cliff face. So I mean, I don't know that you can make it any less rare than it is. It's a funny thing. So in nature, it grows on a vertical rock face, but if you put it in a pot, it will happily grow, out of soil on flat ground. It's probably not the most spectacular specimen you'll ever grow in the garden. But yeah, certainly if we can get it growing, that'd be a good one to get in the gardens.
How are we going? Are we all still there?
Yep.
Oh yeah, we're back. Yeah, go on. You were just saying. Are you still there?
Oh, sorry, am I dropping out still?
Just a little.
It's that magic hour for the internet, I think.
Yeah, the old 6, 7, 8 o'clock. Between 7 and 8, we might have to think about that time. Marcella, and I'll put this one to you as well, Emma, first up, and then Andre, if you want to follow. But Marcella said, sounds like, I like this question. It sounds like conservation is always dependent on funding. Is this something you actively have to pursue to carry on your work?
Yeah, in New Zealand, it's not. I mean, part of our role in a botanic gardens is conservation, so we can kind of do it to an extent, but sometimes these projects like going to offshore islands that might require a bit more money than our kind of day-to-day operational budget do need a little bit of funding. But generally not. We're not actively sourcing funding, at least in New Zealand, for kind of day-to-day conservation projects, although we'd welcome it if it was available, and always kind of take the opportunity to partner with others or international collaborations like the one I talked about.
Yeah. What about you?
Well, am I there?
Yeah.
I'm almost there.
What about you on that question?
It's a similar situation for us. So I've got ongoing funding sort of through the state government, which, you know, it's enough to do some work, but any major projects you're trying to find additional funding to make those projects happen.
And I could probably add that if you compare plants to something else like birds or mammals, plants are pretty underappreciated and underfunded in comparison. So in New Zealand, millions of dollars are spent on saving the kakapo. They're amazing, charismatic birds, but for all plant conservation in New Zealand, the total amount that's spent on a kakapo is not spent on plants. So that's kind of the bias there against plants and animals.
Yeah, I think it's a similar situation in Australia.
Yeah, like the marketability of a rock, of one plant on a rock, inaccessible to any human, like unless they're right into it, like most of the people listening here, their connection to that, it's hard to put that on a billboard on Parramatta Road or on the, you know, on a tram in Melbourne. But yes. I suppose, yeah, John said plant blindness, but I suppose that's the beauty of getting, you know, particularly children connected with things like BioBlitzes and the Atlas of Living Australia and Frog ID and all of these things, to understand that the plants, you don't have the animals without the plants, and you know, your work as science communicators, these stories, I mean, I'm dribbling, you can't see it here. I've just been riveted listening to the stories, and you know, we think from our childhood, you know, the idea of some plant hunter going off into the rainforest and climbing Mount Everest was something that was done in history, and now everything is found. Like the needs for plant hunters today are more important than ever before, because you're not just hunting for those remote rock dwellers, but for all these other species that are being affected by, you know, a changing world.
Absolutely. And everyone here who's watching is an advocate for plants now. You can go away and tell your friends and your family and advocate to your local government about increasing conservation, and especially for plants.
Janelle, there's some great comments. Yes, because plants don't have a voice or look cute, sadly. Yeah.
Oh, I always call plants cute.
Yeah,
likewise.
Yeah. But then, you know, I think, you know, I'm seeing it just in the media worlds and the social media worlds that we all orbit. I mean, the capacity of something like this to take a macro shot that could never have been done, like unless you know, either of you had a professional photographer tagging you, which would blow the budget even further. But you know, on these latest cameras, you can get a close up that is capable of inciting that awe in people.
Absolutely. I always get lots of likes and retweets on my Twitter whenever I post an up-close macro of a plant, always.
Now, Andre, Sturt has jumped on and said, Sturdy, I just got the nickname, good on you, Sturdy. As a horticulturist at Cranbourne Gardens, I feel privileged and proud to be involved in working with Andre and his team, collecting rare and threatened species to add to our plant collection in the gardens. Once in a lifetime experience to go out in the field and learn from people like Andre. Sturdy, thank you.
Thanks, Sturdy,
for sharing that. I mean, that's really lovely to hear. Because you mentioned, and I heard this, but I didn't want to interrupt you at the time, but you mentioned you were overseeing a team of, did you say thousands?
Might have been a turn of phrase. I've had I've been trying to get as many people out as possible. So hort crew, plant collection staff in the herbarium, other scientists. I'd really opened it up. So every trip I'd have a different 2 or 3 people with me, which is exhausting for me. But because I've got to teach everyone each time. But yeah, I know it's really rewarding for everyone else who doesn't have those regular opportunities like I do. So it's nice.
Yeah, John asked, do you have a sense of how the vegetation in that fire scar that you drew with that high-tech graphic has recovered? Oh, you opened that up. You said, look at my classic line.
I'm very high.
Were there any losses?
Look, I haven't come across anything yet. By and large, everything really does seem to be recovering well, which is really encouraging. I think in some of the rainforest areas where the fire has carried into a rainforest, which, you know, some of these rainforests probably have never experienced fire before. I think they're going to have an interesting few decades ahead as they recover. And whether they get invaded by eucalypts and turn into a different type of forest is yet to be seen. But on the whole, it's been actually really, for me, really, really rewarding getting those 2 years in a row of going back out and seeing things recovering. And, you know, year one, it was Microlina stipoides, weeping grass, you know, as tall as your shoulders, just everywhere, and now the shrubs are starting to appear that I couldn't see last year. And yeah, provided we don't go into another 10-year drought or anything like that, I think things are looking good. So
yeah, I like the threads and the themes. Thanks everyone for your comments. It's wonderful. Lee here said, I came across a Syzygium morii in a backyard at work, and from Google, it's a rare tree. And as an arborist, that's cool. Like, you know, and I think as an arborist, Lee, your capacity on the front line of dealing with people who go, well, I just want to chop that down, or I just need to do this, you know, just clear that or do that. Like Lee has a real opportunity to share this information that he's getting from both of you tonight and any other things that he can gather.
Yeah, no, that's great. And yeah, it's really great to see when people have got these just really amazing plants growing.
Janelle said, I give plants for birthday and Christmas to encourage friends and family. That's true. You know, we can all be part of that plant lovers challenge that we're talking about on the banner down there, and you know, we encourage everyone listening to submit your hashtag plant lovers challenge. Take a photo and write something, or do a little video with your favorite plant or a plant that you really love, and tell us why. And it's all about sharing those stories so other people can see what you're doing. Now, this is a good question from Eamon. What's the focus for the next few months, Andre and Emma? Any particular plants or projects that you're planning for? Emma, what's on your radar?
Yeah, so we're working on trying to propagate something that's an annual fern. So ferns are pretty difficult to grow, and you kind of need the right nursery setup, which we don't necessarily have, but it's pretty exciting that we've had it growing in our nursery. And so the next step of that is, can we translocate it into the garden and see what time of year is best to do this, and will it survive? And then the next step will be returning that back to the wild, to its natural habitat. So fingers crossed in the next 2 years, I'll be able to give you an update on that.
Oh, fantastic. And Andre?
So for me personally, these last 2 years, I've had more money than I've had the rest of my working career for doing collecting. I've got about 150 seed collections to process, including germination trials and things like that. So I'm sort of desk bound for quite a while, just processing everything that we've collected these last 2 summers. But I will say a very exciting thing, we're just starting to get into spore banking as well. So I've got a colleague, Daniel Olsen, who's taking the lead on that because he's a fern expert. And I just said I'm drawing the line at things smaller than seeds, so he's picking that up. But yeah, so likewise, we're going to be getting into spore collecting and propagating a lot more rare and threatened ferns from Victoria. So that should be great to see.
Wow, there's some amazing things on both of your agendas there. That's for sure. I've got a couple more questions here, and then we've almost racked up an hour, which is fantastic. Now, the next one I wanted to ask was Peter Bashford said Ticamantha speciosa is a special plant in NZ. There's only been one ever found in the wild. It's from the 3 Kings Islands, but a few are in collections in Melbourne. Can either of you add anything to the Ticamantha speciosa story from Peter?
Yeah, it was found in 1945, and there was just one plant left on the island, and so cuttings were brought back and propagated, and it's probably one of the most threatened plants in New Zealand, and probably one of the most common in home gardens. So I think someone earlier asked about kind of having threatened plants in their home gardens, and this is one of those great stories where, yes, home gardeners have saved this plant by having it in their home gardens throughout New Zealand and obviously in Australia as well.
No, I'll have to look up the plant census at Melbourne to see if we've got one. Never knowingly laid eyes on it.
I mean, there's a nice follow-on with a question earlier from Vicky saying, I like to obtain local threatened plants, propagate and give away at my street library. Sneaky regen. But, you know, you think about it, I mean, that's exactly what those people did back in 1945. I mean, they went out there and said, well, shit, this is the last, well, for what they knew at that point, the last of this plant. I mean, what you're basically doing, Vicky, is prevention. And that's a, you know, and backyards, going back to that other comment about the what was it, the palm, you know, our backyards and our parks, they're valuable places, aren't they? And our gardens, of course, but we're all part of it in that sense.
Absolutely.
Now, did they guerrilla re-veg, John? That's correct. Do they contribute to the plant being threatened by? Here we go. There's a question, Genevieve. And this is a nice question of technique. I can imagine you can both share light on this. Genevieve said, did they contribute to the plant being threatened by taking them from the bush? But I suppose you explain.
In the case of the Tikimanthe, no, it was no one knew about this plant until 1945 when they found this one plant. They were stumbling along and found it. So no, over-harvesting wasn't an issue for this particular case. And I'm sure that has been in the past for some species, but not in this situation.
Yeah. And I guess the work that we do, so we have ethical guidelines that we need to follow for doing any seed collection or propagation, cutting material work. So there's like catch limits, if you like, for, you know, how much you take, and before doing a seed collection, you'll sort of go through and do that math that Emma talked about and say, okay, well, there's 100 fruits here. Each fruit has 10 seeds in it. So, you know, therefore there's going to be X seeds. Maybe I'm allowed to take 5 or 10% of that, which means I can get, you know, this many. At that point, do I want to take that many seeds? Is that enough to even warrant doing? And if so, okay, I'm going to make sure I don't take any more than that, because I don't want to be, you know, negatively impacting the thing that I'm trying to protect.
I don't know if you can see that question from Tex there. I'm interested in your comment, Andre, about the impacted rainforests being invaded by eucalypts and subsequently changing. Do we call that a natural progression, or is there a bigger trigger point?
I think. Good question. I mean, when you think sort of longer scale, you know, all of Victoria was rainforest at one point, and throughout you know, centuries, we've had more and more fire, and each time there's been a fire, we've had a loss of that rainforest, and so it is a natural progression. I guess what's possibly not so natural is the frequency we're having of fires at the moment, because obviously if an area is burnt, it's generally, the general thought is, if you can go through the life cycle of those trees that have invaded in, and they don't get another fire, you'll find that those trees senesce, and what comes up underneath is rainforest. This is a whole nother thesis I won't get into. So it can have that brief moment of sclerophyll forest that reverts back to rainforest in absence of fire. But if you're getting another fire in another 30 years, it's going to remain sclerophyll forest rather than rainforest. And it's then a question of, is that fire frequency natural or not? And I'm not even going to, not going near that.
Yeah, exactly. Can I get a final comment from both of you, just on not just your presentation, but your role as plant hunters, given that was our topic, and how that connects with all the viewers, or the listeners, the viewers.
Yeah, I think for me, it's not just like Andre and my role in plant conservation. I think lots of people can be involved, whether that's community groups, Indigenous people, kids, all sorts. So I kind of encourage everyone to participate in whatever way you might be able to or are interested in doing to save plants.
Golly, yeah, I'm not sure where you go from there.
Good one, Emma. Got him on it. Look, you've got him.
Got me stumped.
You wiped the board there. He's trying to get traction. He'll come good. I'm confident. But thanks, Emma.
Yeah.
Any final thought?
Really, no. I'm completely lost my train of thought now.
Well, I'll throw this as a thought. Extreme plant hunters, savers of the threatened. Thank you. That was from Vicky. So how do you feel about being an extreme plant hunter?
Yeah, I don't know that I'd go that far. I'm very, very privileged to have the role that I have. That's for sure. Yeah, but no, it'd be great to have more people involved.
Bruce, I didn't see that question of yours earlier. There was just one. He said, have you observed some of the defoliation damage that's happening in the wheat zone of New South Wales? Brachychiton, populneum and E-populneum showing extreme stress under the very best of conditions. Exotics such as shyness showing complete defoliation. Local land services determined that disease is not likely. Do you have any connection to any of that? Any thoughts on any of that from Bruce?
No, the wheels fall off my car at the Victorian border, so I don't get into New South Wales very often, unfortunately. So no great insights from me on that one.
Well, Bruce, we'll throw that open to everyone from BGANZ that's watching tonight. So to everyone, Tim, Eamon, and lots of other people from BGANZ and from gardens around, have a look at that question of Bruce's observations, and on that note, everyone will have a look at the questions, and let's keep the conversation going after this. If you've got any thoughts on any answers, feel free to drop in. That's open to our guest speakers, but also to everyone watching tonight. Now, bear in mind that we have one more talk before Botanic Gardens Day, and that will be next Thursday, and it's going to be with Professor David Cantrell, who's the Chief Botanist and Director of the National Herbarium, and he'll be talking about paleobotany and Gondwana, like we're going back into walking with the dinosaurs and really diving deep into history. It's really fascinating, some of this stuff, as equally as fascinating as everything that Emma and Andre have shared with us tonight. Now, the other thing about tonight, we were going to give away a prize if anyone could pick what was wrong with my T-shirt. Did anyone have a comment for a prize? I'll ask Rebecca, is she off? No, Rebecca's off now. Oh no, there she is. Rebecca, is there any? Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, everybody.
Rebecca from BGANZ. Thank you. Rebecca's sort of working away in the background. Oh, hang on. Tex Moon. Is that the first one? Or do you already have someone?
No, nobody's talked about your T-shirt.
T-shirt. Tex Moon's come in. And Tex, I think, salutations, Tex. You've come in. It's not called Open Day. Because this was from the very first year. This is a vintage collection. Limited edition of maybe 2, I think. And I have my hands on it. It's very valuable. And Tex, that's very bad. What does Tex get? Rebecca, for just
Tex
smashing
gets
that.
a Sea Soul prize pack. I'm not quite sure which one yet. I'll have to go and have a look and see what we've got left.
Well, and I'll write Botanic Gardens Open Day in black pen on a white T-shirt, and that can be your collector's one. Yeah, lots of comments
And
coming
John
in.
Arnott says Botanic Gardens are open every day. He's right.
John, drop the mic. You know, as I go 10 minutes over, that's the drop mic moment. I've got nothing. I got nothing on that, John. Thank you. Yeah. You've given me the full stop to just go, okay, that's time out. Look, my cup of tea's empty. My bag of tricks is empty. But I will say, yes, next Thursday is our final webinar before Botanic Gardens Day. Have a look at your local Botanic Gardens, see what's going on, and of course, jump on and share with us on any of your socials the Plant Lovers Challenge. Go to BGANZ.org.au. You'll see it there for details, and show us which plants. You know, tell us a little bit about your plant love and what it is that excites you about it, because you'll help excite other people about our plants and everything about our horticulture. And of course, if you want to know the truth, go to Ground Truth. I rate that as the drop mic moment that I'm going to take with me. So Andre, thank you for that. And Emma, thanks for the amazing images that both of you shared. Seeing you up there with the cohort of people that you took in collecting, the seeds, and Andre going in on canoe and scaling rock faces and doing what you do. It puts a wonderful aspirational action verb-based element into our Botanic Gardens, and this is really why we want to do these talks, to illustrate to people that the Botanic Gardens, the engine behind it, is out there in our landscapes, and both of you have depicted that so aspirationally. It's really wonderful to have had you with us, so thank you both very much.
Thanks for having us. Thanks everyone for joining.
Yeah, and thanks Rebecca for tapping away in the background. And I have a couple of thank you slides here to share with our. Although I can't quite read that. It does. So.
It says Tim, Ubergang, John Arnott, Ben Liu, Emma Bodley, Simpkins, Radine Cuff, Alison Morgan, Helen McHugh, Eamon Flanagan, me, and Jill Scown.
That's the BGANZ team behind these webinars, and also Botanic Gardens Australia and New Zealand. Check out the BGANZ on the website, but also check them out on Facebook to see people's challenges and any other information that's going on. Big thanks to our sponsors there, Sea Soul, Augusta, Plant Health Australia. I just can't see. I can't quite see under these items here. Is there anything else I need to mention there, Rebecca?
That's about it. All
right. Well, I will. Thanks, Rebecca. And again, big thanks to our two wonderful speakers tonight, Emma and Andre. Thanks, everyone. Have a great evening, and thank you for all your comments. Really appreciate it. Bye for now.
Bye.